found a 10mm socket if you're looking for it. Ow.
Return to Roots podcast. Welcome to the show. Today we bring you James Bauer, the veteran friend. He is going to talk about his transition and many transitions that he's had, and he's going to share the wealth of knowledge throughout all of them. Without further ado, James, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Yogi, and thank you, Chris. I'm honored to be here tonight and share with you and your listeners the information that I have, and hopefully people will find benefit from it.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for coming out here, hanging out with the tribe today. You know, I've been having some technical difficulties with my mic, and for all the listeners that are out there, you guys are going to hear this on the thing. This isn't going to be cut. You know, look, you gotta just keep pushing forward whenever things hit speed bumps, because that's just part of life. So
that's it.
Speaking of speed bumps, brother, during your transition, man, what would you recommend people to digest during their transition to help them out with those speed bumps? You know.
Well, a couple of things. I'm going to approach this from two different aspects. One is I'm getting ready to transition out of the military. Things are going to change. We've had a structure. When we were in the service, we had a structured life. For a lot of people, it was all day long, even sometimes at night. I recommend people look at what they want to do. What did they enjoy doing? What's their passion? And I've told people before, I started this website that I'm doing now in 2011, and people who talk to me about it know I'm passionate about it. It's not work. I get up every day and I go to the computer and I work on the website and I subscribe to umpteen zillion newsletters and make contacts on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great resource, by the way. That's where we all met, was on LinkedIn. I recommend them find their passion. Sit down and look at it. It's not, and if you think you want to do one thing and you start to do it and go, man, that was a mistake, you're not locked in. Life is full of changes. And so when you find something you're passionate about, there's a saying that says, when you do something you love, you'll never work another day in your life. I've been doing this since 2011. I retired from the VA in 2019. And next month I'll be retired 5 years. And it's like it's gone boom like that because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Now, sometimes what you enjoy doing, may not financially work out, but you got to find an avenue there. It's amazing you can do that, though. The other aspect I always talk about is from when I worked for the VA, I talk about everything the VA does is legal based. And in order to get an award for a VA claim, you have to have three things. You have to have an in-service event, you have to have a current diagnosis, and you have to have the nexus that ties those things together, that three-legged stool. And so often when I served back in 1970, you got hurt, your superiors told you suck it up and keep going. So did your subordinates, so did the people with you. What are you, a wimp? The bad part about that is if you hurt yourself and there's no documentation, evidence-based, there's no evidence. So they got to make sure they're getting those reports done. If they can get a copy of their medical records, that's critical. I helped a gentleman one time file a claim, and the poor guy had no medical records, and the government lost them. Now, in my mind, if I give you my records and you lose them, then it should be carte blanche. That's not how the government works. If the government loses them, too bad. But that's our government. So that's where I would go. Figure out what your passion is and then work toward it. I went through many transitions, getting out of the service, different jobs that I went through, and we can talk about that some tonight too. And it all, when you go down a road, sometimes you don't see the road signs actually taking you where you think you're going. You think there's probably been 5 or 6 times in my life where I felt like a total failure. But as I look back, I see that all those dots connected and got me to where I am today. And that's critical.
And so with that in mind, right, you mentioned that you went through your military transition a few years back, right? Back in 73, just a few. But with that, you ended up to where you were working at the VA you saw a lot of records going through,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a lot of experience, especially with your website that you've been doing. If you could go back in time right now and you could tell your 16-year-old self, because you enlisted at 17, what advice would you give yourself to be successful during your time in the military?
The first thing that I would tell myself is don't get out. Now, some people think that's weird. But let me explain why. I'm in my 70s now. I went in at 17. I'd have been 37, drawn a full pension, had enough life left to go do another career and have two pensions coming in. The military and the government are one of the few places people can come out with a pension. So if you can put up with the bureaucracy and get into the MOS that you wanted to be in, that's the first thing I'd say is don't get out. And that might sound funny because when I was 17, I went in. I got out at when I got to be the end of my tour. They went, you know what? We've given you acting jack stripes. I was a sergeant. I had the rank and the authority, but no pay. We'll give you the full stripes if you enlist. I went, no, I'm getting out of here. I don't like this place. I just stayed in. I meet people that are retired or med boarded out, and I get mad. I jokingly get mad at them because
Right.
if I was like them and stayed in, I'd have that pension. The other thing I would do is I would suggest that they look at what they're doing, and I know the ASVABs takes where you're going to go. I would prep with that ASVAB. My grandson, I think I mentioned to you guys offline, is now in Goose Creek studying to be a nuke. He spent an inordinate amount of time working on the ASVABs so he could get that job that he wanted to get. That's critical, you know. And I had many jobs when I was in the service. I actually enlisted at 17 out of high school. My dad had a sign to get me in. Helicopters were new. I was a high school dropout. I was going nowhere fast, probably going to end up dead or in jail. And I thought, you know what? My dad served in Korea. I'll join the Army. I'll sign. At that time, you could do a 2-year enlistment or a 3-year enlistment, guaranteed an MOS. I went in to be a helicopter mechanic. I'm thinking I'll go in, I'll do my 3 years, I'll go to O'Hare Airport. I was living in Chicago, and I'll be a helicopter mechanic. I'll have a vocation. I was looking at that, like I said earlier, find that vocation. Where are the steps going to take you? And I didn't even think about the fact that all the helicopter mechanics were going to Vietnam. I didn't go to Vietnam. I was lucky. We had 54 guys in my helicopter school. 3 guys didn't go to Nam. 2 guys went back to their garden in Wisconsin. I went to Fort Riley, Kansas. Luck of the draw, you know. So if I were talking to somebody at 17 or 18 or whatever, and they were getting ready to go in, I'd mention those things. Think about it as a vocation because it's got a lot of opportunities. I learned a lot of things going from a high school dropout going nowhere to becoming a successful business person because of the discipline and the efforts that I learned to apply to myself and what I was doing with the task at hand from the military. Military has a lot of advantages for us.
And now, looking forward, right? You've had a lot of transitions in your life. What advice would you give to someone that is transitioning, right? You transition out of the military, you transition out of your business,
Mm-hmm.
you had other jobs in between, you also transition now and retired out of the VA. What advice would you give to someone and how early so that they can prepare for a successful transition and reintegration?
Great question, Yogi. The transition question, I'm going to go back and touch on it. You'll find I'm very redundant. You learn something and you hear it 7 times, you're going to hear it 7 times from me. Make sure you got your P's and Q's lined out for your VA claims. Figure out what did you do in the military that will allow you to use those skills in a future vocation. All right. And so, you know, a lot of people say, well, I was 11 Bravo. You know, what can I do? Well, you can be a policeman. You can be a security guard. There's a lot of things that will apply. You can also take the information that you have and apply it. I remember very distinctly one time I had a good friend. He wasn't military. This guy was a bartender, and he was trying to work on a resume. And so I sat down with him, And I said, okay, so what did you do? And when we wrote his resume up, one of the lines I remember very distinctly, this is many, many years ago, was that he was responsible for the procurement of all the necessary items to conduct business on a regular basis. That sounded impressive. He was ordering the booze. Okay. When I and I mentioned to you guys too, I transitioned through a lot of different things in life. One of the things I tell people is this: is think about when you want people to look at your resume as you're going out to apply for jobs in that transition situation. We've all read newspapers. What's the one thing, Yogi, that catches our eye when we're going to read an article?
Pictures.
Pictures and the headline. So when I did a resume after I'd been in the sales business, I didn't put my name and stuff. I put it on there, but above that, I put award-winning salesman seeks position. So you can take that information, okay, recipient of many military awards, looking for a new vocation, something like that. And I'm just talking off the top of my head. So those are some things people can do. LinkedIn, we talked about that earlier, is a great resource, but you got to work it, you know. And the other thing is when people are out and they're starting to look for jobs, they have to sling mud. It takes an effort. I mentioned to you guys, I had many different jobs. And when I was about 56, 58 years old, nobody wants to hire you anymore. You're too old. And at that point, you're seasoned and making decent money. They can hire two guys out of college and pay them less than they're paying you. Pardon me. And so when you're looking for those things, you've got to sling mud. I was doing 25 to 35 job apps a day. And when I got the job at the VA, it was almost embarrassing because they called me and said, Mr. Bauer, we're going to offer you this VSR position, blah, blah, blah. And I went, I'm really sorry I have to ask this question. Which job is it? Because I was slinging mud. You know, I mean, you think about, I was out of work for 2 years. You think about 25 job apps a day, 7 days a week for 2 years. That's a lot of mud. You know,
Wow.
VA is another great place. That's another thing I would encourage people to look at. They're used to the government. They're used to that bureaucracy that doesn't move quick. It's like a dinosaur. It's not a a chihuahua that just turns. It takes a long time to move. But the VA is an excellent place for veterans to work. And again, you can apply. I bought my military time back. So the 3 years I did in the Army applied toward my federal pension. So even if they don't take my advice and stay in, how many ever years they did, they can take that information, those years, and apply it toward a federal pension. So that's another great opportunity.
Yeah, that's a double win right there. And so when you were in the military, and then that whole entire period before you went to the VA, what was that period like for you? What was it kind of like?
You mean
Well,
when I
I'm
got
going to
out?
do. Yeah, so like, how many different jobs did because you didn't
Oh,
just go work straight at the VA? Like, it
no,
was
no.
kind of
Let me tell
it
you what
was a
happened. I
trail of
got out of the
jobs.
service. When I was in the service, I met a girl. I was living in the Chicagoland area. I met a girl. We've all heard this story, and I fell in love. And I got married. And she was from Dodge City, Kansas. And I thought, okay, we're going back to Illinois. And she started moping. And I thought, oh, okay, what's the matter? I'm homesick. We hadn't left yet. How can I be homesick? So I thought, we'll go to Dodge City. How bad can it be? It was terrible. Compared to Chicago, it was terrible. Not that Dodge is a bad town. It's a great town. It was just a big cultural shock. I was fortunate. I got a job, literally. I went to work for a manufacturing company, and the job was, see those parts? Yeah, move them over there. And that's what I did with a forklift. Because I had the initiative of being a leader in the military and understanding the discipline, I was able to work my way up through the corporate ladder there was one guy between me and the owner of the company. Okay, I'm not saying that to impress you about me. I'm saying that to impress your viewers that you can do those things if you work toward them. I remember one time when I was in a paint shop at this particular company, and the foreman didn't show up. And I was one of the new guys. I put everybody to work, and I got my butt reamed by the superintendent because I took charge and put people to work. So everybody was working. When he showed up, he went, hey, where's Henry? I don't know. He didn't show up today. Well, who told everybody to go to work? I did. He said, it's not your job. Well, where are you? And when I left the manufacturing business, I went into sales. Sales is a great job. Um, it takes a unique individual. Again, got to have a lot of discipline. I'll give you a kind of little caveat. Because I was a high school dropout, I wasn't an educated man. Um, Matter of fact, I was pretty illiterate. And my wife introduced me to somebody in network marketing. We're not going to talk about network marketing. We're going to talk about ideas. Uh, I met I was salesman driving a route. And so I was spending about, I don't know, probably 150 miles, 200 miles a day, every day in a car. And I met a guy who said, if you listen to motivational tapes, you can develop yourself. And so they put me on this tape program, tape a week. And you should read these books, book of the month. I'm not going to read a book. I hate to read. And the reason I hated to read, because I couldn't read. And sometimes people don't want to admit that. I admit it now. I didn't admit it then. But I read like I was in the 6th grade. And I went to a business seminar one time, and I listened to a guy talk about, if you're not a reader, you're going to stay broke. So I got on the Book of the Month program, and I had my wife read me the books because I couldn't read. And then I went, I'm sure you guys have heard of Zig Ziglar. I went to a Zig Ziglar seminar one time, and Zig said,
That guy's
you
a
have to
genius.
learn to use your voice to be a salesman. And I don't know, you may have heard this or not. There's 7 words. I did not say he beat his wife. You ever heard this? 7
No.
words. I did not say he beat his wife. How many meanings? 7. I didn't say he beat his wife. Statement of fact. I did not say he beat his wife. Statement of denial. I didn't say he beat his wife. Kristen said it. I did not say he beat his wife. I implied it, but I never said it. So based on where you put the inflection, totally changes the meaning of how you're speaking to someone. That's why I hate sending texts, because you can't put inflection in there. Okay. And Ziegler said, you learn to use your voice by reading out loud. And so I took the books away from my wife and I read to her and drove her nuts. That since has changed. But those are the kind, that's another thing I would encourage you people is, if you're not a reader, become a reader, because you'll stay broke. And if you're not going to stay broke and you become a reader, you'll be even richer. So those are some things that I went through in my transition. Was I got my education after I got out of the service, even though I learned discipline and leadership and those kind of things. So I hope I answered your question, Chris. But I kind of have ADHD and do a rabbit trail on you guys. So
you fit right in with this groups here. So we really do appreciate like what you just said about that, because reading, bringing up a good point is reading. And that's why we ask about what kind of content do you recommend people to digest during the transition? Because books and podcasts and listening, like sitting down and listening to things and writing things down, it all has a value for our group, especially during their transition, because we are so disciplined. And if we actually just apply that over and over and over again, we would be surprised with what we can achieve if we do it early on before our transition and start actually working towards improving our chances of succeeding afterwards. And I really liked how you talked about when you got out, you worked your way into a position, and you weren't tooting your horn. You were implying anybody can do this. You worked your way into a position where you were running the show, and that's really awesome. What did it take for you to find that purpose?
Two different places in my life where that purpose came up. When I went to work for the manufacturing company, and I worked I moved the parts from here to there, to a industrial painter, to a cost accountant, I was always looking for that next step. What can I do to earn a little bit more money to support my family? I think all of us are in that boat. No matter what financial level you're at, is what can I do better for my family, for myself and my family? And so I did that, and I worked my way up to a purchasing agent, and it was okay. I thought I liked what I did, and I had people that would sit on the other side of the purchasing agent's desk that were in sales and said, "Oh, you got to get into sales." And I went, "Oh no, it's a lot easier sitting on this side of the desk." And when I got into sales and I got involved in the networking thing and learned how to educate myself, see, we're only worth what we bring to the table. And so if we're bringing to the table the same stuff every day, nothing's going to change. And so I learned to educate myself. And in the process of doing that, I became a passionate salesperson because I knew if I made the sale, and this is not, I mean, people like it's, and I don't want to get in trouble here, but there are salespeople that just sell. Okay, the secret is to help somebody get a product they need. When you sell something, and we've all had that, we've all bought stuff that we didn't need because somebody sold it to us. My wife.
Yeah, I
and
never did that. I've never bought anything I didn't need.
Oh, then I
Not
need to take
once.
lessons.
Not once, never. No.
My wife just
I got a
bought
whole
a truck.
entire shop full of stuff I didn't need.
Yeah, my wife just bought a truck, and what was neat was the young man who helped us. He helped us buy a truck. He didn't sell us a truck, and so it's a matter of perspective. But the education, like I mentioned, and I think it was offline, that things that we do in our life come together as we go down the road. All those different roads come together. So the sales thing was a big part of my transition, getting into that. That helped me become financially solid and successful. And then when I started this website it's been a joy. And the other thing that happened was clear back in 1974. I was working for that manufacturing company, and a guy on the billboard or the bulletin board at work said, "Come study jujitsu at the Dodge City Community College." And people were looking at it, and I went, "You don't want to do that." And they went, "Why?" Because all they're going to do is beat you up. And the IT director was standing next to me, and he said, "Why do you say that?" I said, "Well, because I studied a little judo in high school, and all the guy did was use me as a throwing dummy." He said, "Well, that doesn't happen." I said, "Well, how do you know?" He said, "Because I'm the instructor." And so I got started in martial arts, and that's another discipline that you take the things out of the military and you put it into that. And so I was a passion. I ran a dojo for 15 years. I was too passionate. Cost me my marriage. Didn't get to see my kids grow up because I was in the dojo 5-6 days a week, all the time, training. The sales thing really helped bring me back into how can I take care of my family and become a family member. And then the website it's been a godsend to be able to sit down with a vet and help them save a few bucks here and there. And that's what it started out as. And since then, it's just gone into all different kinds of arenas.
And since you brought it up, can you talk about what exactly is the website?
Love to talk about my website, Yogi. Thank you. VeteranBargains.com started out simply as a place. You go to a restaurant and you save a few bucks, and we don't refer, obviously, restaurants. We don't like their food. So I bump into Yogi and I say, "Hey, Yogi, did you know that XYZ Pie Place does a veteran discount?" And they go, "Oh, no." And they were always happy to hear it. So I started out with a list in my head, then on paper. And I started in 2011 this website with about 40 companies. And you can tell by talking to me, I kind of have a tendency to overdo things. I set a goal to get to 1,000. I figured we could set a goal from 40. 1,000 is a good goal. I had 1,000 in September. It took me 14 years to get there. But the site now has places where you can go to save money. I do 2 Veterans Day lists, one for Wichita, Kansas, which is where I live, and one nationwide. The nationwide list last year had over 400 places on it. The Wichita list had 130 some places on it. I now have about 4 dozen nonprofits that are on there that help us. Companies like there's a group called, I'm going to talk about it briefly here because I think it'll be interest to you guys and your listeners. There's a group called Veterans Breakfast Club. They actually take Vietnam veterans back to Vietnam. Now you have to pay your own way, but they take you, and they have a website and they have all kinds of information. They're on my ongoing events page. Matter of fact, the 29th of March, which you probably know is Vietnam Veterans Day, they're doing a Zoom and live event that should be really interesting for people to attend. And they have all kinds of information out there. And you don't have to be a Vietnam veteran. They do a lot of almost documentary kind of stuff on like World War II, Korea, different things like that. So I've got nonprofits on there. I have what I call useful information. Give you an example. Prior to 2019, the law changed, and you had to be a Medal of Honor recipient, a Purple Heart recipient, a retired military, or 100% permanent and total to use the commissaries in the exchange, or active duty. Okay. In 2019, that law changed, and any veteran who's 0% or more now has access to the commissaries and the exchanges. So you can shop tax-free. So that's kind of the information that's on there. I've got all kinds of events on there that go on. Most of my events are in South Central Kansas, but like Veterans Breakfast Club, they're accessible through the web. So I've got them listed. So it's just a free resource. And the other thing that I did that really doesn't apply to us here, but it probably applies to some of your listeners. I would go into a restaurant and they'd say, "Oh yeah, we do veteran discount. By the way, we do policemen." That's nice. Go to a clothing store. "Yeah, we do veterans. Oh, by the way, we do firemen." Oh, that's nice. And then I realized those people all paid a different kind of price like we did, but I wasn't honoring them. So in 2015-ish, I added first responders. Matter of fact, I just acquired veteran firstresponderresources.com, and it's going to be a sister site right now. It piggybacks on top of VeteranBargains, so that those people who get up every day and put on a badge and a gun and go protect our families from the crazies out there can take advantage of some of this stuff as well. And it's all free. I don't even have a donate button on my page.
That's freaking amazing, dude, because I mean, we're all three veterans here. And when I look at law, firefighting, EMS, all those people that do that job, I look at them just like veterans because they put their life online on hold, and they go out there and they do that job that needs to be done to serve and protect, and they have that whole entire same mentality that a lot of us veterans have. And sometimes we even have it a little bit easier in some ways because they're in the battlefield all the time. Their backyard is where they're at, and we get to deploy to go to ours. So yeah, no, that's pretty honorable that you do that.
Here's a thought for you that you may not have ever even thought about, but it bothers the dickens out of me. The guy goes into the military, doesn't matter what branch. He does his 90 days, and now he's qualified as a quote-unquote veteran. Okay? Somebody goes into law enforcement or firefighters or EMSs, and they do 5, 6, 10, 12 years. They don't retire, but they're nothing. They're not. There's no word for that. There's no word for a guy who put his life on the line every day for 5 years to protect our families. And I think there should be. And I don't know what that word would be, but that's always bothered me. Now if they're retired, they're a retired law enforcement officer or a retired fireman. But if they don't get to that point, and it's like vets, you probably don't know this. Do you know what percentage of military people actually retire? 17. That means there's 83 of us that didn't.
Yeah.
But we get a word, veteran. And it's an honorable word. I love it. And I love meeting guys like you and your listeners.
Yeah, no, that's freaking absolutely spot on right there. And we've had the honor to have some veterans that went into law enforcement afterwards and is doing some amazing things even after that life. And they've come on the show and they've shared some things. And yeah, it's definitely something that Yogi and I and the tribe has been looking at as far as their transition is in some ways almost as complicated, if not even more complicated in some ways, because they don't have that structure that we are very fortunate to have. So thank you so much for putting that together, man. I normally ask this at the beginning, brother, but can you go ahead and just tell me how people, our listeners, can get a hold of you?
Sure. Be happy to. The easiest way, first of all, is the website, VeteranBargains.com. And I always try, I get a lot of people who type in Veterans Bargains, and here's how you remember it. I want each veteran to have a lot of bargains. So VeteranBargains.com. If they happen to be first responders, they can go to firstresponderresources.com and lands on the same page. The other thing they can do, they can email me. My email is info@veteranbargains.com. I do try to respond to everybody. I don't give out my phone number for one simple reason. I have business cards, don't have a phone number. It drives me crazy. I was in sales forever. Here's the neat trick. If any of your vets out there are doing sales, don't put your cell number on the card. And here's why. This is a nugget, okay? Have either of you guys ever had somebody give you a business card, and after you get the business card, you take the business card and throw it in the trash? Hell yes, you have. But here's what happens. You got a business card, and I happen to have look what I got here, guys. See this? I got this on my desk. That's on the website, too. That's important, that 1-800 number. But what I used to do, I didn't put my phone number on my business cards. I would turn the business card over, and I would write my phone number on there in pen, and I would hand it to the guy and go, here's my unlisted phone number. And I've given that piece of paper now an intrinsic value to it. So when they go to throw it away, they go, wait a minute, I got his unlisted phone number. I better keep that. So that's a nice little sales trivia stuff for you guys. But it's kind of neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good nugget for those that are listening. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Hey, before we start rolling it into the final rounds, brother, what are some of the things that you want to make sure that we impress upon the Mil2Vet tribe?
The first thing, and probably the most critical thing, would be for me to say, thank you for your service, for stepping up in those footprints, taking that oath, signing that blank check. I did an article in the newsletter, and it was a blank check made out to the United States of America, thanking you all for your service. That's number one. That's the biggest nugget. Because I mentioned from time to time, when I was working for the VA, we didn't call vets very often, but every once in a while we had a simple piece of information we need, so we'd pick up the phone and call. And I would be on the phone with a vet, and I concluded every phone call the same way. I meant it sincerely, but it was a canned speech. And it was, when I finished the phone call, I'd say, on behalf of myself and our country, I'd like to thank you for your service. And I had combat-hardened veterans from Vietnam bawling on the phone because nobody had ever bothered to thank them. When I served during Vietnam, we didn't even talk about it. I mentioned earlier, I ran a dojo. I had students that were in the Corps. I didn't know they were in the Corps. I had a competitive counterpart that ran a karate school, and he served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. I didn't know we didn't talk about it till, I don't know, 75 was when Nam ended. Probably for 25 years, probably the late 90s, we started talking about it. You just didn't mention it. We had a county commissioner here that told a story about he was going to go into the military, but his brother went in so he could go to college. And his brother was in Vietnam, got wounded. They medevaced him out. All his uniforms were in his hooch, so they gave him a brand new uniform when he finally got out of Walter Reed, put him on an airplane, and sent him dropped him off at the airport in San Francisco during the Vietnam War. They spit on him. He walked into a clothing store, bought a pair of pants and a shirt, threw his uniform in the trash, and went home. That's disgusting. And that's sad. We don't do that anymore. Thank God we don't do that anymore. So that would be one thing, is thank you for your service. The other thing I would do is I'd say, relax, guys. This is a dress rehearsal for where we're going when we get out of here. And I hope you know where you're going when you get out of here. Because if you don't, send me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. I know where I'm going. I've got a Savior, and I'm going to see him. Relax. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. You know, there's a saying in martial arts, fall 7 times, rise 8. It's true. It's not a matter of if you're going to get knocked down, you're going to get knocked down. Don't take it serious. It's okay. You'll be all right. And talk to each other. And man, if you have a problem, call that 988 number. We want you to be here. It's important. You know, and we talked earlier about that 220 group. They're doing phenomenal things. If any of your listeners are suffering with PTSD, please reach out to 220. They have a free service for you. You don't, unlike the VA, you do not have to rehash what your trauma is, but they have a program that within a matter of hours, they're helping vets get over their, and law enforcement get over their PTSD, and they make it a point. They will not tell the VA you're better. A lot of vets go, you know what? I got PTSD. I don't want to get better because I got this gravy train coming in. You know what? They'll take care of you. They're a great group. Have fun. Set a goal. Set goals. Most people don't set goals. You know, there's a story about it. Zig Ziglar tells a story about a guy by the name of Howard Hill. Howard Hill was an archer, bow and arrow. And he could, at 50 yards, he could shoot an arrow, and then like the movie Robin Hood, take the first arrow and hit it with the second arrow. Now, Yogi, I'm going to ask you a question. You ever shot archery?
Twice.
Okay. Let me tell you something. I would bet within 15 minutes, if Howard Hill was alive, he's not. Within 15 minutes, if Howard Hill was alive, I could have you out shooting Howard Hill. Do you believe that?
I would be very skeptical.
Let me tell you how I'm going to do
Skeptical.
it. I'm going to tell you how we're going to do it.
Yes, you
We're
are
gonna
a spectacle.
we're gonna
I
blindfold
agree,
Howard
you're a
Hill.
spectacle.
We're going to blindfold Howard Hill. We're going to spin him around in circles, and then we're going to let him shoot the target while he's blindfolded. Now you're laughing because you're going, how can a guy hit a target he can't see? How can you hit a target you don't have?
Right.
And unfortunately, I was 35 when I learned to do goal setting. Now that sounds
Agreed.
corny. Goal setting? Why would I want to do goal setting? Because if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to get there. And so every January 1st, my wife hates it. I sit down and sequester myself for about 3 hours and I do goals. Do I hit them? Not always. But a goal is like an arrow stuck in wet cement. If you don't hit that arrow by that date, you just move it in cement. That's all. You know, so that's the other thing I'd impress upon your people is set some goals. Learn how to do goal setting. It's interesting. And don't beat yourself up if you miss. But you'd be surprised. I look back at stuff that I set goals 10 years ago, and I've blown way by them by now. It's amazing, man.
I love it, man.
And I like the fact that you mentioned that because we are afraid. Sometimes we don't set that goal and put it on paper because we're afraid that we're not going to be able to make it. Right? We're wishful. It's an idea. It's a dream, but it's not really a goal. You know what I
Right.
mean?
It's a dream.
And the minute that we write it down, now it's real, and we can either choose to ignore it or we can choose to actually do something about it. And it's fascinating, like you mentioned, how many times people that actually sit down and write a goal, how successful they are, and they overshoot it, and they tend to see the problems that they had before, that they thought they were this massive, unattainable goal, and it just changes. And but not only does it change, but it also changes you as you're going through. So I like that, James. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brother. Hey, thanks for pointing that out. And to everybody that's listening right now, James, he's the veteran's friend. You can find his website. We're going to put it down here on the clicker again, and it's going to be VeteranBargains.com.
VeteranBargains.com.
Take a look at his resources. James shared a lot of great resources. You can see his stuff scrolling at the bottom. If not, check out the comments and find his link. Go to his stuff.
Can I bring up one last point?
Oh, go
Absolutely.
ahead, brother. Go.
Okay. If you guys or any of your listeners go to my website, you know about ABC Welding, and they offer a discount, but I don't have them listed. There's a place on the website where you can send me that information, and I'll always verify everything I put on the website. I try to verify. I will verify it, and when I do, let's say Chris says to me, you know what? Mary's Pie Shop has a 10% discount for vets. If he submits that to me, when I list it, I'm going to put on there, Mary's Pie Shop does a 10% discount for veterans and military, thanks to our friend, Navy friend, Chris. So I will give you recognition. You'll get your 15 minutes of fame forever on my website. And that's how I got to 1,000 businesses, because people feed me information. Now, it takes my effort to go verify it. That's fine. Not trying to be insulting. I just want to make sure what I'm getting is correct. But that's a great way to help each other out. That's one of the things that I liked about the military and I learned in the military is we're not out there alone. We're all out there working together, helping each other.
Thank you so much again. And to everybody that's listening, it's your transition. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. Take charge of it. Mil2Vet out.